What if One Piece, dominating the great seas, starting by summoning the Espada? David was transmigrated into the world of One Piece, all because he was accidentally killed by his own overly affectionate British Shorthair cat. To make matters worse, he became the king of a tiny, struggling nation that was on the verge of destruction. But then, he awakened and bound with the Myriad realm's Grand Summoner system. Right from the start, he summoned Ulquiorra and the Shadowspire Oni Clan. Damn it! How are these shadow ninjas able to devour shadows too? Gecko Moria, oh my, this lady in the military uniform has ice powers even more terrifying than mine. Aokiji muttered, heavily wounded and on the verge of death after being defeated by Esdeath. Akainu could only watch in stunned silence as Natsu Dragneel swallowed his magma like it was nothing but a glass of water. And Big Mom, Charlotte Linlin, was left in tears after being targeted by Susuke-san. Why on earth would a monster who can manipulate and suppress souls target her of all people? One after another, legendary powerhouses from countless worlds are summoned. Starting with the creation of the Espada, David's kingdom grows stronger step by step. He will rule over the Myriad realms and dominate every single dimension. Featuring characters and worlds from One Piece, Bleach, this is the legend of dominating the seas, Rise of the Kingdom. Chapter 1, I Am the King. In the second half of the Grand Line, on a massive island, there lies a country known as the Kingdom of Christie. David, who was currently sitting on the throne, looked completely bewildered. Originally, he had just finished work. When he returned to the entrance of his neighborhood, he saw a cute British Shorthair kitten with different colored eyes. He soon realized it was being raised by the young lady living next door. Being a massive cat lover, he went forward to play with the kitten. He did not expect that as soon as the kitten saw him, it would happily jump right into his arms. Immediately after that, David stumbled back a few steps in surprise, and stepped right in front of a runaway Tesla. It was a total tragedy. It happened so suddenly. When David finally came to his senses, he was stunned. Perhaps it was more accurate to call him Christie David now. After crossing over into this world, his new surname happened to be the exact same as his name from his previous life. What was truly outrageous was that David's current identity was the lord of an entire country. He was a newly enthroned king. As for why he was able to ascend the throne as king? It was because almost all the members of the royal family had been brutally assassinated by the world government Cypher Paul organization. The reason for this tragedy was the extreme poverty of the Christie kingdom. Because of the successive tributes demanded by the celestial dragons, the national treasury had been completely depleted. There was no large amount of gold, silver, or precious treasures left to pay the heavenly tribute. The celestial dragons determined that the kingdom was intentionally refusing to pay tribute, viewing it as an act of defiance. In a rage, they ordered a Cypher Paul organization to be dispatched to assassinate the high-ranking ministers of the royal family. Seeing this desperate situation, two neighboring island countries took advantage of the chaos and launched a joint invasion. The old king was assassinated by the enemy, leaving only one remaining prince of the royal bloodline. That sole surviving prince was David himself. With the royal family tragically slaughtered by the Cypher Paul organization and assassins from the two enemy nations, the country could not remain leaderless. As the only prince of the Christie kingdom, David was naturally pushed onto the throne by the remaining ministers to stabilize the country. But at this moment, they were all in a desperate rush. The celestial dragons, those arrogant world nobles, still believed the kingdom had defied them, and the Cypher Paul organization was still actively hunting them. On top of that, various invasions and assassination attempts from the two neighboring countries were constant. All the remaining ministers were completely demoralized, their faces clouded with despair, having no idea what to do. By now, many of the ministers and bureaucrats had simply abandoned everything, fleeing the country to seek refuge elsewhere. They lived in constant fear that the Cypher Paul organization would target them next and assassinate them. Now, only a few key figures remained in the Christie kingdom: a minister of state, a minister of foreign trade, a minister of the treasury and resource management, and finally, the commander of the army. The rest of the administration consisted of just a handful of minor staff. The others had either been assassinated or had abandoned the country and fled. Those who remained were absolutely loyal ministers who refused to abandon the Christie kingdom. They simply could not leave the people behind, and as long as they were still working, they could be considered useful to the state. However, relying on these few people made it far too difficult to fight against both the Cypher Paul organization and two enemy countries. Thinking of this, David couldn't help but feel a massive headache and a sense of helplessness. As David reviewed the kingdom's military forces, a wave of sadness washed over him. The commander of the army was Virgil Jones. Virgil used to be a colonel at Marine headquarters. He was later framed and unjustly imprisoned for a year. After serving his sentence, he was released, demoted to captain, and assigned to the East Blue branch. In a fit of righteous anger, he resigned from the Marines. He had met David's cheap king of a father more than 20 years ago and was recruited by the old king. 25 years later, Virgil was now 61 years old. He had served in the Christie Kingdom's army for 18 years, and he was a true master of the Marine 6 styles. His strength was immense, easily comparable to a Marine vice admiral. He had resolved many difficult crises for the kingdom over the years and earned great achievements. He was undoubtedly the most powerful person in the Christie Kingdom. He technically had 40,000 soldiers under his command, but now, only 17,000 soldiers remained. Fortunately, the commander had rushed back from the overseas battlefield just in time, rescuing David, the sole remaining royal bloodline, from the Cypher Paul organization. But how could they break out of this terrible situation? With two enemy countries eyeing them hungrily, and the lackeys of the Celestial Dragons in the Cypher Paul organization actively hunting them, it would be strange if David wasn't afraid. After all, David was just an ordinary person who had recently crossed over. Suddenly, a crisp, mechanical female voice echoed in his mind. Ding! The great summoner system of the heavens has awakened, and Christie David has been bound as the sole host. Ding! Congratulations on binding to the All-Heaven Summoner system. You have been gifted 1,000 origin points. Ding! Because you have obtained origin points for the first time, your gifted points have been doubled. You have received 2,000. This system currently features 3 levels of summoning card pools: primary, intermediate, and advanced. By spending a certain amount of origin points, you can perform summons in the different pools to obtain characters, items, and treasures from across the heavens and the multiverse. The current card pools are the primary bronze summoning pool, the intermediate silver summoning pool, and the advanced gold summoning pool. Please look forward to future. Origin points can also be used to strengthen and transform summoned objects. They are highly versatile. Please explore their uses on your own, host. After the system's voice finished explaining, David's eyes radiated pure joy and excitement. The Great Summoner System. Able to summon any creature or item from across the multiverse. How incredibly powerful was that? Following the system's instructions, David silently initiated the interface. To his surprise, his consciousness entered a vast, starry cosmic space. In front of his eyes floated 3 planets of different colors: a bronze planet, a silver-white planet, and a golden planet. These were the 3 summoning pools. Looking at the cosmic scene, David was deeply shocked. After calming his excited and amazed emotions, David reminded himself that this was only the beginning. He would get used to such incredible sights soon enough. In the future, even more advanced and majestic features were waiting for him. David focused on the bronze-colored planet. With a thought, the bronze planet rotated forward and stopped directly in front of him. Bronze Summoning Pool. Single summon, 50 origin points. 10-fold summon, 500 origin points. Description: this summoning pool can summon up to Tier 3 creatures and items from across the multiverse. Tier 3? That feels a bit low, David muttered, scratching his head. If this was scaled to a fantasy world, a Tier 3 creature might only be able to compete with basic rockets and missiles. In this highly dangerous pirate world, that level of strength simply wasn't enough to guarantee his safety. Temporarily holding back from using his points, he went ahead to check the details of the silver and gold summoning pools. Silver Summoning Pool. Single summon, 100 origin points. 10-fold summon, 1000 origin points. Description: this summoning pool can summon up to Tier 5 creatures and items from across the multiverse. Gold summoning pool. Single summon, 1000 origin points. 10-fold summon, 10,000 origin points. Description: this summoning pool can summon up to Tier 6 creatures and items from across the multiverse. Let's start by using the bronze summoning ticket to test the waters. After reading the descriptions and the required points for each tier, David decided to use his free ticket first to see how the system worked. Ding! You have used one bronze summoning ticket. Chapter 2, the setup and a legendary summon. As David's command fell, the bronze planet rotated in front of him. Under his curious gaze, the surface of the planet suddenly turned into a swirling vortex, flashing with bursts of fluorescent light. Soon, a beam of light shot out and hovered directly in front of him, while the chaotic bronze planet returned to its normal state. Ding! Congratulations, you have summoned the Golden Desert Eagle pistol. The cyan light gradually dissipated, revealing a card with a bronze pattern printed on it. Golden Desert Eagle pistol. Quality: black iron. Features: bullets slowly regenerate automatically over time. A successful headshot instantly kills the target and restores 10 bullets. Description: a modified Golden Desert Eagle pistol of black iron quality. It is highly lethal to targets below Tier 1. So there was actually a black iron grade below bronze, but it was apparently so low that the system didn't even bother displaying it in the main pool options. Forget it. System, let's go straight for the 10-fold silver summon. Having tested his luck, it was time to use his points. He decided to reserve 1,000 of his 2,000 origin points for a gold summon and spend the other half on a 10-fold silver summon. Ding! You have spent 1,000 origin points to perform a 10-fold silver summon. The silver planet pushed past the bronze one, and bursts of fluorescence began to swirl once more, reflecting the infinite worlds of the multiverse. Immediately afterward, 10 clusters of light emerged, turning into bright streaks that flew toward David. As the light faded, 10 distinct items appeared before him. Ding! You have completed a 10-fold silver summon and obtained the following items. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining a Zoan-type Black Bear Devil fruit. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining 50 Grade A Rio Wazamono swords. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining a pack of premium soft pocket tissues. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining 10 packs of pickled mustard greens. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining a rare collector's item, Vice Admiral Jayan's signature pink silk scarf. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining top-tier observation haki with future sight. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining 10 tons of solid gold. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining the Shadow Ninja Core. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Captain level Reiatsu from the Shinigami realm. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining a Legion Enhancement Medal. A pink silk scarf belonging to Vice Admiral Jayan? What on earth was the system thinking? He was an upright, honorable young man. Why would the system give him this kind of item? It was even made of sheer pink lace. David cleared his throat, quickly putting the awkward item away. While the first few items were relatively common everyday goods, they were still decent. But when David saw the final 3 rewards, his eyes lit up instantly. Top-tier observation haki with the ability to see the future. The Shadow Ninja Core. And Captain-level spiritual pressure from the Shinigami world. An expression of pure ecstasy appeared on his face, and David almost shouted out loud in excitement. However, he quickly suppressed his emotions, maintaining his composure. He couldn't react like a child. He was now the king, the ruler of an entire nation. Not only did his own strength need to stand at the very top of this world, but the strength of his warriors and citizens also had to be elevated. The ninja soldiers of the Shadow Corps, with their unique ability to travel through shadows, were perfect for setting up an elite intelligence department to gather secret information and spy on his enemies. Meanwhile, the future sight observation haki and the captain-level Reiatsu were meant to directly strengthen his own body, allowing his personal power to skyrocket in an incredibly short period of time. David was highly confident. As long as he had enough time, everything in this world would eventually bow at his feet. After placing the rest of the summoned items into the system's storage space, David focused his mind. The two glowing spheres containing the future sight haki and the captain-level Reiatsu instantly melted into his chest, merging with his soul and body. When he opened his eyes, a look of immense, majestic power flashed across them. A terrifying burst of spiritual pressure erupted from his body, sweeping violently across the entire throne room. As his gaze swept toward the heavy doors of the palace, he could see that the guards stationed outside had instantly fallen to their knees, their souls feeling as if they were being hammered by an invisible, crushing weight. At the same time, using his new future sight, David realized that if he continued to release his captain-level Reiatsu at this intensity, the souls of the guards outside would suffer permanent damage within 2 minutes. Having felt the incredible power of both his new abilities, David quickly withdrew his spiritual pressure, and everything in the hall returned to normal. Clatter! 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 Alert! Who dares to break into the palace and threaten the king? Damn it, it must be the assassins from the neighboring countries or the world government cipher Paul agents. Hurry! Protect the king in the main hall. Sensing the immense pressure that had just erupted, a large number of royal guards were instantly alerted. They rushed to the scene, slamming the palace doors open and charging inside with furious expressions, ready to hunt down any assassins. However, as they looked around the vast, silent hall, they found absolutely nothing. Their young king was simply sitting on his throne, looking back at them with a calm expression. "Your Majesty! Where is the assassin? Your humble servants were late to protect you. Please punish us, Your Majesty." The guards let out collective sighs of relief when they saw that their king was completely unharmed. The wise old king was already dead. As the sole remaining hope of the Christie kingdom, if this new king were to die as well, the country would completely collapse, and the surviving citizens would be divided up and slaughtered by their enemies. Because of this, the guards were incredibly tense, constantly terrified that their young, vulnerable king might meet a sudden end. One by one, they knelt on one knee to beg for his forgiveness. "There is no danger. You may all dismiss yourselves," David said, waving his hand calmly. The guards looked at each other in confusion, but they did not dare to question their king. Bowing respectfully, they retreated from the palace. The terrifying pressure they had felt earlier had made them feel as though an invisible mountain was crushing their chests. Though they were deeply curious, they kept their heads down and departed. "System, perform the gold summon," David commanded. Ding! You have spent 1,000 origin points to perform a gold summon. Congratulations! You have successfully summoned the character, Ulquiorra Cipher. Chapter 3, The Shadow King and Ulquiorra's Attributes. Ulquiorra Cipher. What an incredible summon! This was a powerhouse easily comparable to an admiral or an emperor of the sea. Hearing the system's notification, David was instantly filled with pure ecstasy. The first thought that popped into his head was the sheer, world-shaking power of the fourth Espada. Based on Ulquiorra's combat strength in the original Shinigami storyline, he was undoubtedly at the very peak of this world's power scale, and his true destructive capabilities might even surpass conventional limits. With this, the Christie kingdom no longer had to fear the threats of the Marines or the world government. A kingdom protected by an admiral-level powerhouse was no longer an easy target. Of course, if the Marines deployed a full buster call to wipe out the entire island, things could still get complicated. But David had no intention of just sitting back and waiting. One Ulquiorra was an incredible start, and he would summon even more powerhouses in the future. Let's call Ulquiorra out first. Focusing his mind, David watched as a golden light gathered in the center of the hall, gradually forming a dark, swirling vortex. A slender young man dressed in a white coat slowly stepped out of the portal, taking a few steps forward. Ulquiorra looked up at David sitting on the high throne. He immediately knelt down on one knee, placing his right hand over his heart, and said in a tone of absolute respect, "Ulquiorra cipher, at your service, your majesty." David smiled warmly at the loyal and powerful subordinate kneeling before him. Having someone this strong swearing allegiance to him brought an immense wave of relief. He almost wished he could drag the 5 elders here right, but he quickly calmed himself. The waters of the One Piece world were incredibly deep. As the rulers of the world, the 5 elders were definitely not simple characters. At the very least, they possessed admiral-level combat strength, not to mention the mysterious ruler, Aimu, who stood above them all. "There is no need to kneel, Ulquiorra." "Stand up," David said, keeping his voice steady and regal. "Yes, your majesty," Ulquiorra replied, rising to his feet and standing silently to the side. "Shadow Ninja Corps, appear!" David called out. Instantly, dark shadows pooled across the floor, and dozens of ninja soldiers emerged from the darkness, kneeling in unison before the throne. "We greet the Shadow King." This was the title the summoned ninja soldiers used to address David. The title surprised him slightly, but he quickly figured out the reason. Since he was the one who had summoned the Shadow Corps, and because he was a king in this world, he had naturally become the sovereign of their shadow realm as well. This was highly interesting. David realized there were many hidden details to the summoning system. But right now, his attention was drawn to another massive notification from the system. Ding! Congratulations on summoning the Shadow Ninja Corps from Jackie Chan's Adventures. You have unlocked the ability to manipulate and control shadows. You are now the King of Shadows. Ding! Congratulations on summoning the Shinigami character, Ulquiorra Cipher. You have received 30% of the summoned character's raw attributes as direct feedback, and you have acquired all of his passive abilities and combat skills. Incredible! He was taking off. The summoning system was far more powerful than he had initially realized. Receiving a portion of a summoned character's strength was a massive boost. David waved his hand, dismissing the shadow ninjas and commanding them to scatter throughout every corner of the capital. They would become his invisible eyes, monitoring the city and keeping track of any suspicious outsiders. With their natural ability to merge into the shadows, a single ninja soldier could easily monitor a radius of several kilometers. While the entire Shadow Corps consisted of thousands of ninjas, David only summoned about 200 for now. Summoning too many at once would place a heavy burden on his mental energy, which wasn't necessary yet. 200 ninjas were more than enough to monitor a single capital city. System, open Ulquiorra's character attribute panel. David commanded, curious about his power level. Ulquiorra Cipher. Grade, Vasto Lord, High Class. Race, Hollow, Arankar. Talent, Co-Evolution, current talent limit reached. Abilities, High Speed Regeneration, Iron Skin, Hero, Sonido, Solita Vista, Cero, Bala. Note, these are his standard, unreleased state abilities. Weapon, Zanpakuto, Murcielago. Evaluation, with his full power unleashed, he is capable of destroying an entire city within a short period. His strength is comparable to a Tier 6 powerhouse of the multiverse. Tier 6? So Ulquiorra's full release is comparable to a Tier 6 powerhouse. David mused. Though he didn't fully understand the exact power scale of the higher tiers in the multiverse, knowing that Ulquiorra could casually level a city was incredibly reassuring. If Ulquiorra's full power was this terrifying, how absurdly powerful would characters like Peak Azen be? David shook his head, putting those thoughts aside for now. There was no need to worry about such distant things. Once he gathered enough origin points, he could simply summon Azen and see for himself. Right now, his main goal was to gather more points, summon more allies, and rapidly increase his own strength. Wait, they found someone suspicious. Suddenly, David was interrupted. One of the shadow ninjas he had sent out to patrol the city had just sent back a mental report. Interesting, David muttered. Was it the agents of the Cypher Paul organization, or was it the assassins from the neighboring countries? Keep a close eye on them, David commanded. He turned to the silent Arrancar standing nearby. Ulquiorra, go with them and eliminate the intruders. Chapter 4, Ghostly Foes and Rising Dread. Understood, Ulquiorra replied softly. With the current power levels of this world, David knew that his basic shadow ninjas wouldn't be able to stand up against the elite agents of the world government's Cypher Paul organization. After all, in their original world, they could be dealt with by normal martial artists. To be absolutely safe, David decided to send Ulquiorra to handle the situation. With Ulquiorra on the scene, even if a Marine Admiral showed up, they wouldn't be able to harm them, and Ulquiorra could easily. Meanwhile, on the other side of the capital. Inside a 3-story Western-style building, 6 men dressed in sharp black suits and a woman wearing a tactical vest were gathered around a large round table, discussing the situation inside the Christie Kingdom. The sole topic of their discussion was the young king, David, who had just ascended the throne. "How now? I don't understand. Why don't we just go in and slit that brat's throat? How are we supposed to do that? If it wasn't for your greed, we wouldn't have missed our best opportunity to assassinate him. Now that the old man Virgil has returned from the battlefield, he's guarding the kid constantly. We have completely lost our window of opportunity." The man who spoke had a deeply sullen expression, glaring angrily at his fellow agents and the woman sitting nearby. HMPH. That little brat got incredibly lucky. Damn it, if we exceed the deadline set by St. Charles, all of us are going to face a horrific execution. As the combat agents assigned to serve the celestial dragons, they knew only too well how cruel their masters could be if they were displeased. The mention of St. Charles sent a shiver of pure terror through all 7 agents in the room. Originally, their CP for squad had consisted of 12 members. However, during their initial clashes with the Christie Kingdom's Royal Guard, although the guards were relatively weak, their desperate defense had cost them 2 elite agents. Later, during their attempt to assassinate David, they had been intercepted by Commander Virgil, who had rushed back from the front lines. Believing they had the advantage in numbers, the CP for agents had surrounded Virgil, launching a coordinated assault. However, they had severely underestimated the old Marine's strength. Virgil had easily slaughtered 3 of their agents on the spot. That was why they did not dare to make a reckless move on the palace now. As they were heatedly debating their next move, the shadow ninjas hidden in the darkness received David's command. Without warning, more than a dozen shadow ninjas emerged silently from the shadows of the room, instantly launching a barrage of sharp shuriken and kunai across the space. What? An enemy attack? Damn it! We've been discovered. Are these ninjas? How is this possible? Why are there Wano Kuni ninjas here? Iron Body. The sudden ambush startled the CP for agents, but as seasoned killers, they reacted instantly, using their specialized physical techniques to dodge and block the incoming projectiles. However, one of the agents who had been previously injured and was in poor physical condition was a fraction of a second too slow. A sharp kunai pierced his neck, and he collapsed to the floor, dead. Finger pistol, flying air bullets. The leader of the squad, Melisa, roared in fury. Flicking his arms, he thrust his fingers forward, sending compressed air bullets flying across the room. The attack struck several shadow ninjas, instantly vaporizing them into harmless black mist. Tempest Kick. A massive blue wind slash erupted, instantly obliterating several more ninjas while tearing a massive hole through the brick wall of the building. The violent blast echoed loudly through the quiet streets. In the streets below, the local residents began to scream and scatter in terror, desperate to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Is this a devil fruit ability? After clearing the initial wave of attackers, Melisa looked around the room with a highly vigilant expression. He had assumed these ninjas were an elite force trained by the kingdom, but seeing them turn into black mist, he realized they were likely created by a devil fruit user. Something is wrong, leader. I have a really bad feeling about this, a thin, pale agent muttered, swallowing hard. Just a few seconds after he spoke, the dark shadows in the empty street outside began to pool together like black liquid. Row after row of silent shadow ninjas emerged from the darkness. A wave of cold sweat broke out on the backs of the CP4 agents as they looked out the ruined wall. They were completely surrounded by more than 300 silent, red-eyed shadow soldiers. Based on their brief exchange, they estimated that each of these shadow ninjas possessed the physical strength of a standard marine soldier. While they were much stronger individually, Myriad himself possessed a high power level. Facing a relentless army of 300 immortal soldiers in a confined space was incredibly dangerous. How were they supposed to fight this? They would eventually drop dead from exhaustion. Where had this massive shadow army come from? Don't hold back. We need to break through and escape immediately before that old monster Virgil arrives. Myriad roared. With a furious howl, Myriad activated his Zoan-type devil fruit, transforming into a massive, muscular werewolf standing nearly 4 meters tall. Utilizing his enhanced physical form and the shave technique, his speed doubled. He became a blur of claws and fangs. The other remaining agents also unleashed their full power, activating their respective python and hound beast forms. In less than a minute, dozens of shadow soldiers had been destroyed, dissolving back into mist. Ha ha ha! I thought these things were supposed to be scary, but they're nothing but weaklings. One of the snake hybrid agents laughed arrogantly, thrashing his massive tail to crush several ninjas. The other agents nodded in agreement, their confidence returning. What they didn't know was that these shadow soldiers were entirely immortal. They were simply using basic combat tactics to keep the agents occupied and drain their stamina. Furthermore, the agents' mastery of the Marine 6 styles made them highly elusive targets for the basic ninjas. However, the shadow soldiers had already achieved their primary objective, delaying the targets. Suddenly, the CP4 agents noticed that the surrounding shadow soldiers were rapidly melting back into the floor, completely retreating from the area. Ha ha ha! The cowards are running away. They're afraid of us, the snake hybrid agent laughed loudly, flicking his tongue. But before his laughter could fade, the temperature in the air plummeted. A majestic, suffocating, and utterly terrifying spiritual pressure descended from the sky, crushing down on their souls like an invisible mountain. Chapter 5, Kill CP4. Follow-up missions. The clouds and mists in the sky swept up, and chaos poured over. A drizzle of ink rain fell, and drops of the ink like rain fell upon them. They felt as though their bodies and souls had been hit incredibly hard. This coercion, which made their very souls terrify, seemed to come from nowhere. But they knew one thing for certain, a terrifying powerhouse was coming. As if to confirm their guesses, the deep, suffocating spiritual pressure directly forced them to kneel on the ground. Myriad gritted his teeth and struggled to raise his head. There, he saw a young man in white clothes with pale skin, a green tear stain under his eyes, and a strange, white-horned mask on one side of his head. With both hands in his pockets and a sword at his waist, he walked slowly toward them. "Are you the enemies His Majesty spoke of?" Ulquiorra's indifferent question left the CP4 group completely dumbfounded. This terrifying young man in front of them was actually someone from this kingdom? This kind of terrifying powerhouse, who caused the very weather to change just by appearing, was actually loyal to someone else? It was absolutely outrageous. Myriad was completely stunned. This kingdom was poisonous, wasn't it? And why didn't such a strong man show up in the first place? It was not that he had never fought a rear admiral from naval headquarters before. He had even fought a hawkish rear admiral, and he could still trade a few tricks with him. But against this kind of momentum, which directly crushed him without even lifting a hand, Myriad knew that he and the others were completely doomed today. He clearly realized that this kingdom had far more than just 2 vice admiral level combat forces. Is the Reiatsu too strong for you to bear? Forget it. His Majesty's order is to destroy the enemy. Glancing at the CP4 crowd indifferently, Ulquiorra turned and began to walk away. When the CP4 agents saw Ulquiorra turn and leave, they thought there might be a turning point, but then they heard his next words. Before they could even beg for mercy, an even more terrifying Reiatsu descended, directly crushing their souls and causing them to lose consciousness. Instantly, several sharp swords formed from pure Reiatsu pierced through their heads. CP4, all dead. Having easily solved CP4, Ulquiorra maintained a cold face from beginning to end, having successfully completed his task. Meanwhile, Davy, who was waiting in the palace, received a prompt from the system. Ding! Your subordinates have killed 7 CP4 members. You have obtained 42 origin points. Ding! Congratulations on completing the hidden mission, crushing the minions of the celestial dragons. Your subordinates have eliminated all remaining members of CP4. You have obtained 200 origin points. Because you completed the hidden mission, you have unlocked the follow-up missions. Mission 1, Conqueror of Tyrants. Description: although the minions of the celestial dragons are destroyed, the armies of the 2 enemy countries are still invading your kingdom, and their assassins are still active. Destroy the armies of the 2 kingdoms, conquer the Marista Kingdom and the Myriad Kingdom, execute the leaders of the 2 kingdoms, seize their territorial wealth, and claim their queens and princesses as your own. Mission rewards: 1000 origin points, 1x gold summoning ticket, national happiness +1. Mission 2, the King's Revenge. Description: take revenge on the one who caused this series of disasters, St. Charles, and execute him in public. Quest rewards: 5000 origin points, 1x silver 10 consecutive summon coupon, the Heart of the King. Is this quest reward a bit lacking? Davy looked at the second mission with a bit of a headache. Even though he wanted to kill that trash celestial dragon too, the task reward seemed a little less exciting than he hoped. Killing St. Charles right now would certainly attract an attack from a marine admiral. Because he was the ruler of a kingdom, naval headquarters would likely launch a buster call led by an admiral. Damn it, isn't it just an admiral and a buster call? Just let them come. After completing the task, I will collect the rewards and summon a few more powerful characters. When he thought about the fact that he was now the lord of a country, backed by the summoning system of the heavens, Davy's eyes flashed fiercely, and he made up his mind. Slaughter! St. Charles must be slaughtered. But what is national happiness? When in doubt, Davy asked the system directly. Replying to the master, national happiness is the loyalty of the residents of your country to the nation. The higher the loyalty, the more your citizens will have a higher sense of belonging to you and the country, serving you wholeheartedly and never betraying. In addition, when your national strength reaches a certain value, it will also unlock special effects. After listening to the system's explanation, Davy suddenly understood. In other words, this was a summoning plus kingdom development system. Because of his status as the lord of the country, had it affected some of the functions of the system? Interesting. Davy's eyes flashed with a different kind of light. Check the current national strength and national happiness. Davy commanded immediately. When it came to national strength and happiness, Davy was quite curious. Kingdom, Kingdom of Christie. King, Christie Davy. National strength, 866, rising. National happiness, 86, falling. Kingdom territory, 6,051 square kilometers. Nationals, 662,000 citizens. Comprehensive evaluation, a kingdom that is in jeopardy, but has reached a turning point. Is happiness declining? Davy frowned at the downward trend behind national happiness. It seemed that the recent war and the calamity brought by the celestial dragons had caused anxiety and panic among the people, resulting in a decrease in happiness. Sure enough, those 2 countries and the celestial dragons had to be dealt with. Otherwise, how could he properly rule as king? On the contrary, the national strength value was slowly rising because his overall force had increased. But the comprehensive manifestation of national strength was not just raw force. It also calculated land area, total land resources, total population and quality, economy, technology, and more. So, what we need to do now is to improve the combat effectiveness of the Legion first. Ulquiorra already provides high-end combat power, but the combat power of our army legions is generally too low. Chapter 6, Advanced Evolution of Ghost Shadow Core. By destroying those 2 kingdoms, my country will have enough territory and population. But it requires strong force and an army. Davy, sitting on his throne, fell into deep thought. After a while, he came back to his senses. He took out the last item from his silver 10 consecutive summons. It was made of silver, a silver shield inlaid with a gold edge, with a sword standing right in the middle. Legion Enhancement Medal. Tier, Silver. Effect, after selecting the target and using it, the designated legion will be strengthened once, and its rank will be improved. Note, only valid for legions below Tier 3. What a powerful medal ability! Davy had not actually seen the combat effectiveness of his own country's military in person yet. However, since he had replaced the original Davy who died in the assassination, he had inexplicably possessed the memory of his predecessor. Therefore, he knew the combat strength of his country's army. To put it frankly, under the training of Virgil Jones, the former Marine colonel, the army of this kingdom was decent. Against the two neighboring kingdoms of Marista and Myriad, they could fight well. However, recently, many ministers of the kingdom had been assassinated, and many officers had also been killed, causing the combat effectiveness of the entire army to drop significantly. It was simply not suitable as a target for reinforcement right now. Because the legion formed by the army of their own country had not even reached the first tier level, there was no value in using this enhancement medal on them. The target for the medal enhancement is the Ghost Core. Use it! Sitting on the throne, Davy's eyes flickered, and he chose the Ghost Shadow Core to receive the medal without hesitation. Ding! You have strengthened the Ghost Shadow Core once, and the Ghost Shadow Core has been upgraded to a second-tier army. Ghost Shadow Core. Belonging to Christy Davy, Shadow Kingdom. Species, Shadow, Ninja. Abilities, Ghost Sneak, Shadow Blast, Shadow Giant. Level, 2nd tier. Overall evaluation, ninja soldiers who fall into the darkness of the shadows. They seem to have excellent potential. Are 2 new abilities added? Looking at the 2 newly added abilities in the properties panel, Davy murmured to himself. With a thought, he summoned a ghost ninja. Meet the Shadow King. Nodding lightly, Davy directly checked the personal attribute panel of the ninja soldier in front of him. Ninja Soldier. Level, 2nd tier. Race, Shadow, Ninja. Talent, Shadow. Abilities, Ghost Sneak, Fighter, Weapon Specialization, Super Learning Ability, Shadow Blast, Shadow Giant Transformation. Weapons, Ninja Sword, Darts. Comprehensive evaluation, an almighty ninja soldier. As a household ninja, they might make your daily life very comfortable. Wow! This panel attribute was incredibly powerful, possessing 6 distinct abilities on its own. Seeing the super learning ability in the ability column, Davy couldn't help but want to laugh. It was no wonder that after Xiaoyu became the Shadow Queen in the original series, these ninjas could perform all kinds of surprising tasks. Stealing milk, serving tea, pouring water, brushing her teeth, and washing her face, all kinds of magical operations. From this point of view alone, perhaps the Ghost Ninja was the one with the greatest potential among the 10 Shadow Core. Their learning ability was too strong, just like living people, and their skills made them incredibly versatile. Shadow Blast, Self-Destruction. This ability description was remarkably concise and to the point. Davy smiled helplessly, then moved on to check the other new ability. However, Davy's eyes widened after reading the description for the Giant Transformation. Shadow Giant Transformation, Make Yourself Giant. After swallowing the shadow energy of other living beings, you can become even more giant and powerful. This was the ability of another Shadow Legion entirely, the Giant Shadow Legion. This was absolutely outrageous. This wasn't just a simple advancement, this was a complete evolution. Davy understood that the characters and items summoned from the system might have undergone some special changes because of his presence. But who could have imagined that the Ghost Ninjas could evolve like this? Having this special ability gave Davy even more confidence against the 2 enemy countries. Originally, he had Ulquiorra, the monster he summoned, plus his own national army and Virgil's forces. Taking the 2 kingdoms was only a matter of time. Now, he had an evolved version of the ghost ninja soldiers after their advancement. He could push forward directly. Someone, summon Commander Virgil. Davy didn't bother to think of any more complex tricks, so he directly summoned Virgil. He prepared to summon a massive wave of ghost ninja soldiers to cooperate with his own army, led by Virgil, with Ulquiorra acting as support, to overthrow the two kingdoms completely. Then, he would execute St. Charlos in public, complete the task to get the rewards, and make another massive wave of summons. After that would come the aftermath of executing the Celestial Dragon, meeting the Admiral of the Naval Headquarters and facing the Buster Call. Within a few minutes, an old man with white hair at his temples, wearing light armor and possessing a highly muscular body, walked into the hall. "Your Majesty, what have you called me for?" Coming to the bottom of the throne steps, Virgil knelt down on one knee, pressed the palm of his right hand to his chest, and asked respectfully. Although the young man in front of him could be pinched to death at will, Virgil had been loyal to the kingdom and the old king his entire life. As the old king's son, Davy would naturally receive his assistance in ruling the kingdom. Betrayal was what he hated most, and he would never do such a thing. "Get up, Uncle Virgil. You don't have to be so formal with me." Davy gave the loyal old commander the respect he deserved. Who wouldn't like a loyal minister? Looking at the questioning expression on the commander's face, Davy didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "Uncle Virgil, I have decided to officially launch a general attack on the two countries tomorrow." Chapter 7, The Ghost Army is Terrible. Drive in person. What? Your Majesty, now that our army's combat effectiveness has plummeted, it will be difficult to fully advance a counter-offensive and compete against the combined armies of both countries. Virgil's face changed instantly upon hearing the words, and he began to analyze the situation seriously. The Marista Kingdom and the Melod Kingdom now had a combined army of 80,000 people. Although most of them were a mere rabble, it would still be incredibly difficult to defeat them with their own force of just over 10,000 soldiers. "Don't worry, I am fully prepared to start this war," Davy said, squinting his eyes with a smile as he snapped his fingers. "Ghost ninjas." Swish, swish, swish. In an instant, a row of neatly standing ghost ninjas emerged from the shadows of the hall. Each ghost ninja exuded a suffocating, dangerous aura, and all of them stared directly at Virgil. This is... The moment he was stared at by the group of ghost ninjas, Virgil felt a faint sense of crisis. But what shocked him even more was when he looked toward the open courtyard outside the hall behind him. Rows of ghost ninjas suddenly emerged there as well. At first glance, it looked as though the ground was covered in a heavy blanket of darkness. A full 800 ghost ninjas had appeared outside the palace hall. "Your Majesty! Are these the mysterious legions trained by the late king?" Virgil, whose heart was pounding with shock, barely regained his senses and asked in disbelief, his voice stuttering. At this moment, he had no doubt that if he were besieged by this mysterious army of hundreds, even he would die. "No, this is my personal Ghost Shadow Corps." The corners of Davy's mouth rose slightly, showing a hint of pride. "Show your abilities to Commander Virgil." Knowing that Virgil didn't know the specific abilities of the ghost ninjas, Davy wanted to make sure he could command and assign them tasks easily. He gave the order immediately, and a 12-man squad of the Royal Guard was summoned into the hall. When the guards arrived, they were visibly stunned to see this dark ninja army. Why was there such a large group of dangerous-looking figures standing in a row? Could it be that an enemy force had invaded the palace? When they turned their questioning eyes toward the courtyard outside, Davy gave them a quick look. The captain of the guard understood the signal and held his breath, waiting. However, as soon as they stopped moving, two ghost ninjas approached them at high speed. "What? What is this?" "Your Majesty, watch out!" The next moment, in less than 5 seconds, the shadows of all 12 guards were physically pulled out and devoured by the ghost ninjas. Thud, thud, thud. The guards all fainted and fell directly to the ground. What kind of power is this? Virgil's sharp eyes quickly noticed that these guards were not dead, but had simply fallen into a deep coma. These are the basic abilities of my ghost ninjas, Davy explained. If a person whose shadow is swallowed cannot regain their shadow within a single day, the shadow will turn into permanent energy for the ghost ninja, and the victim will die directly from their state of lethargy. Davy explained the terrifying capabilities of his shadow force. In the original series, after being swallowed by shadows, people fell into a deep sleep but suffered no serious permanent effects. But in this world, with the upgraded version of the Ghost Ninja Core, anyone who didn't regain their shadow within 24 hours would die. What an incredible ability! Hearing Davy's calm explanation, Virgil couldn't help but feel deeply shocked. But then, he watched as the two ghost ninjas who had devoured the guard's shadows began to grow, expanding from a height of 2 meters to a massive 4 or 5 meters tall. Then, he saw another ninja sink into the shadows and emerge instantly from another corner of the room. 2 other ninjas began to duel, showing off flawless martial arts and weapon skills. Finally, the 2 giant shadow ninjas spat the shadows back out, restoring the guards, and under the shocked gaze of Virgil. Boom! A ninja detonated. Right where they stood, a massive crater over 2 meters wide and tens of centimeters deep appeared. Virgil took a deep breath, completely speechless for a long time. Horrible. How could such an army even exist? With this terrifying force, Virgil was absolutely confident he could defeat the 2 kingdoms within 3 days. Your Majesty, give me 5 days, and I will take down the Marista Kingdom and the Myriad Kingdom. If I fail, this old servant will not return to face you. The sound of his light armor clanked against the floor as Virgil knelt solemnly on one knee, requesting his orders and making a military promise. With such a terrifying force alongside his original army, if he couldn't conquer those 2 kingdoms, his decades as a commander would be a joke. I will give you 2 days. Conquer the Marista Kingdom and the Myriad Kingdom. Facing Virgil's promise, Davy spoke in an unquestionable, commanding tone. As soon as those words came out, Virgil's expression changed. He was about to protest the short time frame, but then he heard Davy speak again. And this time, I am going to lead the campaign in person. In just half a day, he had gained strength and abilities that could not be underestimated. Davy, of course, was eager for an opportunity to display his power. After all, his current personal strength had already reached Tier 3. Chapter 8, Davy's Incredible Status Panel. This time, I will lead the expedition personally. The deafening, authoritative words echoed from Davy's mouth. Virgil suddenly realized that the young king he had watched grow up had truly matured. His tone left no room for doubt, showing that he was not joking. He was determined to conquer the 2 kingdoms himself, and along the way, slaughter St. Charlos. If he remembered correctly, St. Charlos was currently enjoying a life of luxury in the Marista Kingdom. The king of Marista believed he had successfully aligned himself with the celestial dragons, but in reality, he was treated worse than a dog. But this was perfect. If St. Charlos tried to run away, the mission would only become harder. I understand, Your Majesty. This old servant will arrange everything immediately. Feeling the young king's absolute determination, Virgil sighed softly and wasted no more words. After bowing, he departed with the newly awakened guards. 800 shadow ninjas followed silently behind him. As night fell, Virgil brought the 800 ghost ninjas to deploy the army, formulate the battle plans, and prepare for tomorrow's decisive battle. After Virgil left, Davy returned to his bedroom. Your Majesty, the 2 guards at the door saluted in a hurry, opening the heavy doors for him. With a soft hum, Davy stepped into the room. It was called a bedroom, but it was actually a massive royal suite. It spanned hundreds of square meters, filled with expensive decorations and a giant European-style bed that was 5 or 6 meters wide. Seeing this, Davy's face twitched slightly. Was such a huge bed really necessary? After thinking about it, he smiled. Perhaps it would come in handy one day. Shaking his head, he clicked open his personal status panel. Host panel. Name, Christy Davy. Occupation, Great Summoner of the Heavens, King. Kingdom, Christy Kingdom, Level 0. Level, Tier 3. Race, Human, Void Arankar, Trait. Talents, All Heaven Summoning, Devour Evolution, Shadow Manipulation. Abilities, Advanced Observation Haki, Future Sight, High Speed Regeneration, Hero, Steel Skin, Sonido, Solita Vista, Sero, Bala, Reiatsu Perception. Equipped Weapon, Zanpakuto, Blackwing Demon. Summoned Allies, Ulquiorra Cipher, Ghost Shadow Core. Warehouse, Golden Desert Eagle, Zoan Black Bear Fruit, 50 named swords, 1 pack of tissues, 10 packs of pickled mustard, Momosaji Giant Silk Scarf, 10 tons of gold. Origin points, 242. Overall evaluation, a Grand Summoner has been born. The system is pushing it with that evaluation, Davy muttered. He wanted nothing more than to pull the system out and beat it up. How dare it judge its owner like that? However, he had successfully received 30% of Ulquiorra's strength and his entire skill set. He hadn't expected that even the Arankar attributes would be transferred to him as a passive trait. He wasn't a hollow, and he hadn't changed races, but he now possessed the evolutionary traits of one. This was incredibly interesting. System, my kingdom shows level 0. What does that mean? What are the conditions to upgrade, and are there special rewards? The level 0 status had caught his attention. This really was a summoning plus kingdom development system. After a brief silence, the system replying to the master, your kingdom is currently at level 0. Every time your kingdom upgrades by 1 level, you will receive rich rewards and special national effects. The way to upgrade is to increase the national strength of the Christie Kingdom. When the value reaches 1000, it will become level 1. At 2000, it will be level 2, and so on. Once you reach level 10, your kingdom will be promoted to an empire. I see. With that in mind, his kingdom would soon reach level 1. Once he conquered the 2 neighboring kingdoms, the Christie Kingdom's strength would inevitably skyrocket. He couldn't help but look forward to the rewards. This black bear fruit is a bit useless, isn't it? Davy looked at the devil fruit in his hand. A common Zoan fruit didn't offer much in terms of high-level combat. Virgil didn't care for devil fruits, and giving it to a random subordinate wouldn't create a strong fighter overnight. After some thought, he decided to recycle it. Ding! You have recycled 1 Zoan black bear fruit. You have obtained 100 origin points. Wow, that's quite a lot. Davy's eyes lit up. If a common Zoan gives 100 points, what about an ancient or mythical type? At this moment, a brand new path to gaining power opened up in his mind. Chapter 9, The Counter-Offensive begins. The system did not give a direct answer about the recycling value of other fruits, so Davy stopped thinking about it for now. After relaxing in the hot spring under the care of several beautiful maids, he fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, the kingdom's army and the Ghost Shadow Corps were fully assembled outside the capital. Virgil was the commander of the legion, but Davy was the one leading them. I won't waste words. This expedition is our counter-offensive. The celestial dragons are tyrannical and greedy, and they seek to destroy our nation. We will not let our enemies live in peace. We will become their abyss. The CP for agents and the assassins who infiltrated our land have been completely wiped out by my Ghost Corps and Ulquiorra. Now, it is time for the celestial dragons and those 2 damn kingdoms to pay. Warriors, charge forward and crush the enemy. I will stand and fight right alongside you. We will fight to the death. Davy gave a passionate speech, instantly igniting the fighting spirit of the soldiers. To the death. We are willing to serve His Majesty. To the death. We are willing to serve His Majesty. The passionate declarations echoed across the fields, and the soldiers were deeply moved. Indeed, everyone in the country knew about the endless tributes demanded by the celestial dragons. Just because they couldn't pay, the world government had sent assassins to murder the royal family and ministers. The neighboring countries had taken the opportunity to invade, pushing the Christie Kingdom to the brink of collapse. Today, their newly enthroned young king dared to challenge both the celestial dragons and the two kingdoms. The anger they had been holding back for so long could finally be unleashed. They were not afraid of death, they were only afraid of a king who lacked the courage to fight. This battle-hardened legion had been trained by Virgil for decades. As Davy's speech ended, Virgil took the stage to offer a few final words of encouragement. Without further delay, Davy's royal carriage was surrounded by the convoy, and the army of several thousand set off. 2 hours later, the battlefield appeared before them. It was a field littered with corpses, where the army of Christie was holding the line against the invading forces. When Davy's reinforcements arrived, the forces of Marista and Myriad were in the middle of launching an attack on the defensive garrison. "It's Commander Virgil! Commander Virgil has returned with reinforcements. Excellent! Kill those invaders!" Seeing Virgil return with a fresh army, the defending soldiers were overjoyed, their strength instantly returning. The horn for the counter-offensive was blown, and the combined forces of the two countries were actually pushed back dozens of meters, showing the first signs of defeat. "Damn it, Virgil is back! What were those assassins doing? How is the young king still alive? The CP for group is a bunch of useless trash." Seeing Virgil leading the charge, the enemy commanders began to curse in anger as their front lines were pushed back. "Ghost Corps, assist the soldiers! Charge!" Davy ordered from his carriage, his eyes looking indifferently at the battlefield. "For His Majesty! Charge! For His Majesty! Charge!" Following the command, thousands of soldiers roared and rushed forward, with the ghost ninjas of the Ghost Corps right behind them. A few minutes later, dozens of ghost ninjas grew to a height of 8 or 9 meters, transforming into massive, shadow giants that began to slaughter the enemy. When these giants consumed enough shadow energy, they became even more terrifying. Each ghost ninja was now a second-tier existence, possessing combat capabilities on par with CP for agents, with hundreds of Do of physical power and a physique 10 times stronger than an ordinary human. As they tore through the enemy ranks, it was like wolves unleashed upon a flock of sheep. It was a merciless slaughter. The regular soldiers of Christie were completely stunned. Where did this monster army come from? It seemed to have been brought by Virgil, but they soon learned from their comrades that this army, which possessed powers similar to devil fruits, was directly controlled by their new king. Furthermore, the assassins and the CP for agents who had plagued the country had all been wiped out by this very shadow force. For a time, the soldiers' respect for their young king reached an absolute peak. An hour later, the combined forces of the two countries were completely defeated. After more than 15,000 enemy soldiers were killed, the remaining thousands collapsed in panic. They threw away their armor, fell to their knees, and begged for mercy. "The battle here is finished," Davy murmured to himself, looking toward the horizon. "Now, it's all up to Ulquiorra on the other side." Chapter 10, Ulquiorra is here. Break the city. The battle on the Three Kingdoms battlefield was over, and the Kingdom of Christie had emerged completely victorious. Davy's deep eyes looked into the distance, toward the territory where the Marista Kingdom and the Myriad Kingdom intersected. The Three Kingdoms stood together on a massive island. Of the three, the Christie Kingdom possessed the largest territory, occupying the eastern position and holding the absolute best territorial resources. The Marista Kingdom lay in the west, with a territory roughly 4/5 the size of the Christie Kingdom. The Kingdom of Myriad was located to the north, directly adjacent to the Marista Kingdom. Its territory was barely more than half the size of Marista's. It had almost fallen out of the definition of a proper kingdom. If it weren't for the overwhelming presence of Christie, the strongest nation on the island, these two neighboring countries would have had to cooperate all year round. Otherwise, the Kingdom of Myriad would have long since been swallowed up and absorbed by the Marista Kingdom. Before his main army had even set out, Davy had sent Ulquiorra ahead to the Marista Kingdom. He had ordered Ulquiorra to rely on his incomparable, crushing strength to attack the Marista Kingdom first. By the way, his goal was to capture that fat pig, St. Charlos. Once the celestial dragon was secure, Davy would bring the main army over to sweep up the mess and slowly deal with those damned fools. With Ulquiorra's sheer strength, Davy believed that unless two marine admirals joined forces against him, these two kingdoms were destined to be wiped out today. So, this is the Myriad Kingdom. High in the sky, standing firmly in the air, Ulquiorra cast an indifferent glance at the kingdom sprawling below. Pop! A map was instantly crushed into pieces by the immense Reiatsu radiating from his hands, turning to ash and scattering into the wind. Expanding his sensory network, Ulquiorra slowly opened his eyes after a few seconds of scanning. Weak. His expression remained completely flat, but a trace of disappointment flickered in his eyes. Under his spiritual perception, there were only a handful of people in the entire kingdom whose life energy and soul strength even reached the level of a giant hollow. Not a single person possessed the strength of even the lowest level Jillian. If it weren't for His Majesty's explicit orders, Ulquiorra would have only needed to fire a few full-power Zeros to completely annihilate this entire kingdom. But recalling what Davy had told him about marine admirals and the threat of a Bastacor, Ulquiorra felt a slight spark of interest. With that thought, Ulquiorra descended. His body transformed into a white beam of light, shooting directly toward the gates of the capital below. Since the goal was to conquer this kingdom, he would start at the city gates and carve a path straight to the enemy's heart. What is that? What is that white streak of light? It's a person. An enemy. An intruder is coming. On top of the city walls, the defending soldiers suddenly spotted Ulquiorra plummeting from the sky. The alarm bells rang out frantically, throwing the entire wall into chaos. Don't let him get close. Shoot him down with arrows. What arrows, you idiot? An officer roared, slapping his subordinate across the head. Fire the muskets. Use the cannons to blast him out of the sky. Bang, bang, bang. Boom. Boom. With a single order, dozens of muskets fired into the sky, and 6 heavy cannons roared in unison. However, it was all noise and no substance. Ulquiorra descended rapidly through the smoke, landing with a solid thud onto the roof of the gatehouse. He stood there, watching their frantic actions with utter indifference. Ha ha ha! Die, you fool! As the smoke began to clear, the commander laughed maniacally, looking toward the empty sky where the white light had been. He thought the intruder was some legendary figure, but it turned out to be just a useless trash who fell right into their trap. Did he really think landing from the sky made him look cool? He was just a sitting duck. Zero. But in that exact moment, the commander and his men heard a cold, quiet voice coming from the roof of the gatehouse right behind them. They spun around to see the pale young man in white pointing a single finger at them, whispering those 2 words. Instantly, a deep red light illuminated the entire city tower. Under that scarlet glow, an extremely dangerous and suffocating aura enveloped the gate. Despair and the raw stench of death filled the air. Shoot! Shoot! Shoot him now! Kill him! The commander screamed in absolute terror as the crimson light condensed at the young man's fingertips. Boom! A red beam of light several meters thick tore through the gatehouse and exploded. The massive stone tower was instantly blown apart, shattered into countless fragments as a towering cloud of smoke and dust billowed into the sky. A moment later, the alarm bells of the Myriad Kingdom began to echo throughout the entire land. From the ruined rubble of the shattered city gate, a slender figure stepped out, walking calmly onto the streets of the capital. Chapter 11: Arrogant and Domineering Celestial Dragons. Inside the Grand Palace of Myriad, music filled the air as girls in revealing outfits danced to entertain the gathered princes and nobles. On the highest throne sat St. Charlos, wearing his signature transparent space helmet dome. Seated below him were the 2 kings, King March of Myriad and King Parker of Myriad. Both rulers were desperately trying to flatter St. Charlos, though both of their faces were swollen like pig heads. It was easy to see just how difficult and painful it was to serve a world noble. Hee, Your Highness Charlos, do you think my small kingdom is finally eligible to become an official member of the world government? March asked, offering a strained, flattering smile. And what about me, Your Highness? Please consider the Myriad Kingdom as well. Parker chimed in eagerly. The two old men, both in their 50s and 60s, cast aside all dignity to lick the boots of the celestial dragon. Slap! Idiot! Do you think becoming a member of the world government is that easy? Charlos suddenly delivered a brutal slap across March's face, dazing the king and causing Parker to flinch back in terror, fearing he would be next. Yes, of course. To show my sincerity, I have decided to offer 10 tons of gold, 5 boxes of rare treasures, 1,000 standard slaves, and 300 beautiful maids to your temple, St. Charlos. March stammered, holding his bruised cheek. Though his heart was bleeding at the massive loss of wealth, he could only swallow his anger and offer even more gold, silver, and slaves just to keep the conversation going. I suppose I can remember that, Charlos replied flatly, raising an eyebrow. The tribute was small compared to his vast wealth, but it was enough to keep them around. Even if these two kingdoms were completely hollowed out of their riches, he wouldn't care. To a celestial dragon, a nation that wasn't even a member of the world government was nothing more than dirt. Crash! Suddenly, the heavy palace doors were slammed open, banging violently against the walls. Bastard! St. Charlos is present. How dare you make such a racket? March roared in anger at the guard who had burst in. But before he could finish his curse, the guard interrupted him, gasping for breath. Your Majesty! It's terrible. An enemy. A single enemy has broken through the city gates and is marching into the capital. What? March gasped. How many troops do they have? Has the Christie Kingdom launched a full invasion? No, Your Majesty, there is only one person, the guard stammered. Only one? What does our royal guard do all day? Do we pay them to eat dirt? March raged. The city gates were heavily fortified, and elite guards patrolled the streets constantly. How could a single intruder walk right into the capital? Why hadn't the guard subdued him yet? Was he a powerful pirate on the level of a marine vice-admiral? Where is this enemy now? March demanded. The intruder is already inside the palace, the guard squeaked, trembling in absolute terror. March almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of joke was this? The intruder had already breached the palace walls. Thank you for leading the way, guard. A cold, indifferent voice drifted into the hall from the corridor. The chaotic room fell instantly silent as everyone turned their eyes toward the entrance. Ulquiorra, dressed in his pristine white clothes, walked calmly into the hall, casting a brief glance at the reporting guard. The guard looked at him as if he were staring at a ghost, collapsing to the floor before scrambling away in a panic. How dare you? March bellowed, plucking up his courage as he stepped forward. Do you know where you are? St. Charlos, a noble of the world, is sitting right there. This is not a place where a lowborn brat like you can run wild. If you do not wish to bring ruin upon yourself and whatever faction stands behind you, kneel down and beg for mercy immediately. Otherwise, if you anger St. Charlos, you will face absolute destruction. March glared at Ulquiorra, trying to sound confident. He knew that since his palace guards had failed to stop this monster, his only hope was to use the absolute authority of the celestial dragons to terrify the intruder into submission. What March didn't realize was that every single soldier and guard who had tried to block Ulquiorra's path was already lying dead in the corridors. Moving the name of the celestial dragons was indeed March's only card left to play. But Ulquiorra merely glanced at him, continuing his slow walk forward. Boom! As Ulquiorra passed, a wave of suffocating reiatsu flared. The invisible pressure slammed into March, crushing him directly onto the cold stone floor. You. As a regular human, March couldn't withstand the sheer weight of the spiritual pressure. He spat out a mouthful of blood, instantly grievously injured. Help! Run! Run for your lives! Guards! Where are the guards? The entire hall erupted into absolute chaos. Nobles, ministers, and palace maids scrambled toward the exits in a desperate bid to escape. But as they reached the grand doors, a heavy pressure descended upon them like a collapsing ceiling. Thud, thud, thud. One by one, they were all slammed face first onto the floor, completely pinned down by the invisible weight of Ulquiorra's Reiatsu. Oh. On the throne, St. Charlos's eyes lit up as he watched the display. Hava hava. You're quite capable, aren't you? Charlos didn't care about the lives of the local nobles at all. Instead, he was thoroughly impressed by Ulquiorra's strange power. I, St. Charlos, a noble of the world, shall bestow upon you the ultimate honor. I will give you the chance to become my personal slave. Charlos laughed arrogantly. With a slave this powerful, he could return to Marie-Joy's and humiliate the other celestial dragons in the slave arenas. This pale youth would certainly win him immense prestige. As for money, celestial dragons didn't care about berries. All they cared about was showing off their rare treasures, their strongest slaves, and their most beautiful servants, gloating in their victories over one another. Ulquiorra blinked slowly, looking at the bloated figure on the throne with his usual indifferent face. If it weren't for Davy's explicit orders to capture him alive, he wouldn't have let this disgusting creature draw another breath of air. Your Highness, please step back. This man is extremely dangerous. Beside the throne, the personal bodyguards of St. Charlos, 4 men dressed in sharp black suits, stepped forward, their faces grim and highly alert. Chapter 12, The Defiant St. Charlos. As elite agents assigned to protect the celestial dragons, these bodyguards possessed formidable combat skills and were highly sensitive to raw power. They could feel the crushing pressure radiating from Ulquiorra. What shocked them most was that this pressure wasn't Conqueror's haki, it was a completely different, terrifying force they had never encountered. Standing before this pale youth felt like staring into the abyss of death itself. There was no doubt about it, this teenager was an absolute monster. Young man, suppress your aura. The noble standing before you is not someone you can afford to offend. Palut, the captain of the guard, warned. He swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. His Majesty the King has ordered the capture of the celestial dragon St. Charlos, as well as the kings of Marista and Milod, Ulquiorra replied flatly, keeping his hands tucked in his pockets. To him, these bodyguards were nothing more than insects with the strength of weak hollows. He didn't even bother to look them in the eye. Ark! You insolent brat! Charlos screamed, completely enraged by Ulquiorra's dismissive attitude. Break his limbs. I want him hung from the palace gates for a week. Let's go. Take him down quickly. Palut roared. His body rapidly transformed, his muscles swelling as he turned into a giant grey wolf. Utilizing the Marine 6 styles, he vanished in a blur, using shave to move in a Z pattern before appearing directly behind Ulquiorra to strike. Clang! The other 3 bodyguards leaped into the air simultaneously, unleashing a barrage of tempest kicks that sliced through the air. Boom! The floor and walls shattered, throwing up a thick cloud of dust. But Ulquiorra stood completely still, watching with cold indifference. Palut's sharp wolf claws were pressed firmly against Ulquiorra's back, but they couldn't penetrate his skin. What? You can use iron body? Palut gasped in horror. His claw strike had been delivered with maximum force. Even a Marine headquarters rear admiral wouldn't dare block it using only iron body. But what kind of monster was this kid? His skin felt like solid steel. It wasn't that Ulquiorra had blocked the attack, it was simply that Palut was too weak to even scratch his outer defenses. He had only succeeded in tearing the youth's white coat. Danger! An overwhelming instinct of death flared in Palut's mind. He desperately tried to use shave to retreat. But the moment his feet touched the ground, a pale, slender hand reached out from the dust. Before he could react, the hand clamped around his face like a steel vice and slammed him headfirst into the stone floor. Splat! With a single, effortless motion, Palut was killed instantly, his head crushed against the stone. Palut! Damn it! He's too fast. Use shave. The remaining 3 bodyguards were horrified and enraged. Their captain had been killed in a single move, and though they knew the enemy was far too strong, they couldn't run. If they abandoned a celestial dragon, the world government would execute their entire families. Flying crescent slash! The red-haired bodyguard roared, unleashing his strongest slash. The crimson arc sliced through the air, cutting the palace chandeliers in half as it flew toward Ulquiorra. The other two closed in from the flanks, hoping that even if the youth blocked the slash, they could pin him down and coordinate a lethal blow. Smack! To their absolute horror, Ulquiorra didn't even bother to dodge. With a flicker of impatience in his eyes, he casually swiped his hand, shattering the flying energy slash into pieces. In the next instant, his hands blurred forward, grabbing both flanking bodyguards by their throats. Crack! Crushing their necks effortlessly, Ulquiorra turned his cold gaze toward the last remaining bodyguard in the air. The red-haired man felt a cold sweat drench his back. He couldn't win this. He had to run. But he couldn't run alone, he had to take the celestial dragon with him. "Your Highness, we must leave," he yelled, lunging toward St. Charlos, grabbing the terrified, snot-nosed noble. However, the bodyguard had forgotten that he was slower than Palat. Carrying a grown man made him an even easier target. A beam of green Reiatsu shot through the air, instantly piercing the bodyguard's skull. Thud! The red-haired man collapsed, and St. Charlos was thrown hard onto the floor, sliding several meters across the stone. The impact bruised him heavily, and he began to wail in pain. You filthy commoners! How dare you hurt me? I am a celestial dragon. Just you wait. A marine admiral will be here soon to wipe your entire kingdom off the map. Kneel before me and beg for mercy. Cut off your own arms, and I might consider sparing your life. Chapter 13, Davy's Amusing Show. Scrambling up from the floor, St. Charlos continued to scream curses, entirely oblivious to his desperate situation. He still held himself high, trying to order Ulquiorra around with his hollow authority. "Stupid trash," Ulquiorra muttered. Even he was starting to feel a slight urge to obliterate this annoying creature. "You?" Thud! Before Charlos could utter another insult, Ulquiorra stepped forward and planted his boot firmly into the noble's mouth. The hall fell wonderfully silent as the bruised and bleeding celestial dragon knocked out cold. Ulquiorra glanced around the ruined palace. Many of the nobles and servants had already fled, but they wouldn't get far. Davy's army would capture them soon enough. All he had to do now was wait for his king to arrive. About an hour later, surrounded by a legion of ghost ninjas and royal guards, Davy stepped into the palace. Glancing at the ruined state of the grand hall, he let out a light chuckle. "Well done, Ulquiorra." Below the throne, St. Charlos and the two kings were piled together like sacks of garbage. Nearby, the captured ministers and nobles stood shivering under the watchful eyes of the red-eyed shadow ninjas. "I only did my duty," Ulquiorra replied quietly. To him, destroying a kingdom's defenses was no different than stepping on an ant. There was no joy, no pride, and no effort required. Hearing their exchange, the surrounding soldiers finally understood. This pale young man was the legendary new commander of their kingdom. He had single-handedly broken the capital's defenses and slaughtered thousands of enemy troops. The realization left the soldiers of Christie deeply awed and terrified. Commander Virgil's expression flickered with a mix of shock and concern, but in the end, he remained silent. Only Ulquiorra noticed the old man's hesitation before turning his attention back to Davy, who had walked up the steps to sit on the Marista throne. "Wake them up," Davy ordered, resting his chin on his hand with a playful smirk. Splash! A soldier marched forward and threw a bucket of freezing water over the three captives. The sudden shock made them shiver violently as they sputtered back to consciousness. "Ah! Who did that?" Charlos shrieked. "Ah! You! You monster!" March yelled. "It's the King of Christie!" Parker gasped. The three men reacted in completely different ways, their eyes instantly locking onto Davy, who was looking down at them from the throne with an amused smile. Well, hello there, gentlemen. How are we doing today? Davy greeted them warmly, as if he were simply catching up with old friends. King of Christie! Do you have any idea what kind of unforgivable crime you have committed? March barked, trying to sound imposing. You have assaulted and kidnapped St. Charles. If you do not wish for your entire nation to be erased from existence, release us this instant. March threatened, hoping to use the name of the celestial dragons to force a surrender. Now, Davy, Parker chimed in, putting on a gentle, paternal tone. I always knew you were a sensible boy. Don't let a moment of anger cloud your judgment. I am sure His Highness Charlos will forgive your ignorance if you release us now. He spoke with such practiced warmth that one might actually believe he was a caring uncle. Never! Charlos screamed, completely failing to read the room. The moment I get out of here, I will command the nearest marine base to deploy their fleets and destroy you all. I will make sure every man in your kingdom is enslaved, and every woman is sold off. The hall fell dead silent. March and Parker turned pale, their hearts stopping in sheer panic. What an absolute idiot! They thought, screaming internally. Davy was clearly playing along, and they were close to negotiating a way out. Why would this fat pig threaten to wipe out the kingdom the second he was freed? Now, the King of Christie would never let them leave alive. Oh dear, Davy sighed, his playful smile fading into a mock look of profound sadness. You see, uncles, it's not that I don't want to let you go. It's just that His Highness Charlos seems very intent on destroying my country the moment he leaves. He acted as though he were deeply torn, forced into a corner by their threats. No. Davy! My dear nephew! Parker scrambled to explain, sweating profusely. His Highness Charlos was just kicked in the head by your commander, Ulquiorra. His mind is clearly addled right now. Yes. His brain is temporarily damaged. He doesn't know what he's saying. March joined in frantically. Davy nearly lost his composure and burst out laughing. Ulquiorra? Really? But I don't think St. Charlos agrees with you, Davy said, holding back his laughter as he looked down at the furious celestial dragon. Chapter 14, Unacceptable Kindness. Hearing March and Parker claim his brain was damaged, St. Charlos almost exploded with fury. How dare these filthy commoners insult him? Once I escape, I will order a buster call and sink this entire island to the bottom of the sea. He vowed silently. But realizing his current danger, Charlos swallowed his pride and spat out through grit teeth, I was out of my mind just now, King of Christie. If you release me, I promise I will not seek revenge against you. But as for these two low-born pigs beside me, you can execute them however you like. Charlos sneered, trying to turn the tables on the two kings who had just insulted him. You bloated, useless pig! March roared, his fear turning into pure rage. We tried to save your life, and you betray us. You ungrateful bastard! I'll kill you myself! Parker screamed. Realizing they were likely doomed anyway, the two old kings snapped. They lunged at St. Charlos, throwing punches and kicks to vent all the humiliation they had suffered under his rule. Ah! How dare you strike a god? I will have your families executed! Charlos wailed, trying to fight back, but his decades of luxury had left him weak and clumsy. Kill them, King of Christie! Kill them and I will make your kingdom an official allied nation of the world government. Charlos shrieked as he was pummeled. Ha ha ha! Stop! Separate them! Davy laughed, thoroughly enjoying the pathetic spectacle of his enemies tearing each other apart. Several soldiers stepped forward and dragged the three men apart. All three were heavily bruised and panting for breath. Davy! My dear nephew! Parker crawled toward the steps of the throne, tears and snot streaming down his face as he begged. You cannot kill me. Your father and I were dear friends for many years. Yes, Davy. We are neighbor nations on the same island. We should support each other. March begged, crawling right beside Parker. Hee, Davy sneered, stepping down from the throne. If I recall correctly, my grandfather once provided massive financial aid to your kingdom, didn't he, Uncle Parker? Without our gold, your nation would have starved to death decades ago. Yet, you repaid our kindness by invading our borders the moment we faced trouble. Where was your sense of friendship then? Crack! Davy delivered a brutal kick straight to Parker's face, sending him tumbling backward. Parker spat out a mouthful of blood along with several shattered teeth. And you, King March! Davy turned his cold eyes toward the shivering ruler of Marista. If my grandfather hadn't spared your father when he knelt and begged for mercy, your family line would have ended 50 years ago. You lived like kings because of our mercy, yet you chose to betray us. Davy brought his boot down heavily onto March's face, grinding his heel into the king's cheek. The surrounding nobles and soldiers watched in silence, stunned by the revelation of these buried historical truths. I am sorry, Davy. I was wrong. I will never do it again. March cried out, his face crushed against the stone. I will give you my daughter. She will serve as your personal maid. Just spare my life. I will give you my queen as well. I haven't touched her in 10 years. She can be your servant, just let me go. March sobbed, completely willing to sacrifice his family to save his own skin. Yes. Yes. My queen and princesses are yours too. Parker agreed frantically from the floor. In the back of the hall, hidden among the captured nobles, 2 beautiful women and 2 young girls wept in silent horror at the cowardice of their husbands and fathers. Well, Davy smiled, looking down at the pathetic rulers. Since my 2 dear uncles are so concerned with my personal life, I would hate to reject such heartfelt generosity. Release the queens and princesses, and bring them to my palace. Davy's smile turned incredibly cold. As for my 2 dear uncles, drag them to the courtyard and burn them at the stake.